In the previous section, we discussed who these abusers seek to target. We found that their victims are targeted because they had some resources that the abuser wanted and needed. We also found and discussed how normal life blips and transitions can leave anyone vulnerable to being targeted and coerced and finding themselves within any kind of relationship, intimate, work, whatever, in which an abuser has controlled and subjugated us into their network of abuse. We saw how important healthy attachments are growing up and through adulthood. And if we do not have these healthy attachments, this can also lead to vulnerability that coercive controllers can target in order to recruit and trap and snare their victim. In this section, we're going to go into a bit more detail about the actual abuser, what's going on behind the scenes, under the surface, why they are the way they are, and why they seek to control and manipulate others. In order to do this, we're going to do a brief discussion of narcissism. As has been noted throughout the literature, narcissism can be healthy. There's a form of narcissism that is adaptive, healthy, and right. But for those who abuse, those who seek to control others, they have what can be called a pathological or malignant form of narcissism. We'll go into more details about the differences in the following slides. Firstly, let's look at healthy narcissism. The important thing to know is what it is, and it can be defined as a physical, emotional, and psychological investment in the self. It understands and is aware that caring for oneself and following your dreams, goals, and desires is good in itself. There's nothing wrong with having goals that you want to pursue. There's nothing wrong about enjoying certain activities and pursuing them and making time for them. There's nothing wrong about setting aside time for yourself for these things. The thing about healthy narcissism is that it recognizes that one's own individuality and that of others in a relationship in which reciprocal contact is maintained and preserved and enhanced is a good thing in itself. Relationships need and should be reciprocal. Healthy relationships acknowledge this. It acknowledges the good in the other as well as ourselves. It acknowledges that it's right for the other person to have their own goals, dreams, and desires for them to fulfill them, as well as for ourselves. So healthy narcissism can be seen as living authentically, that is true to ourselves, rather than in what the French philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre called bad faith. Bad faith is putting on an act, going through the motions, not being who you truly are and living according to your values and respecting the values of others. Healthy narcissism balances the self and the community in which one lives. It recognizes that we live in a community. We live in a community of relationships. of friends, loved ones, acquaintances, work people. We come across all kinds of different people in daily lives, and it recognises that they have value as well as ourselves. And finally, it incorporates what can be called the light triad, which I'll talk about next. The light triad, which is different from the dark triad that we'll be discussing later on, which is particularly relevant to abusers and those who seek to control others, is a positive thing. There are three aspects to it. The first is empathy. Now, empathy is recognition of what another person is going through. It involves the thinking part and the assessing part of our brain. It acknowledges and sees when one is hurting and when a person is struggling. It recognizes that. And this is the starting point. The starting point, not the end point, the starting point. The next step is compassion, which, if empathy is the thinking component, compassion is the emotional component. It is that concern for the others, that feeling for the others, that if somebody is suffering and pain or struggling, we feel for that. It might involve the triggering of mirror cells within our brains. These cells fire when we see somebody suffering, and we feel that suffering within ourselves. It is part of being human, genuinely, authentically human, is to feel compassion, concern for another who's going through pain and suffering and struggling. And the third aspect of it is altruism, and that is the behavioral component. That is acting on what we've recognized, acting on the concern that it's raised within us, the feelings, those emotions, and acting in a way to help and support another, while also doing this in a way that recognizes their own authentic selves, that is not patronizing, does not take over, but walks with that person. And this is an important part, as I said, of our humanity and working within a community, within a family, within a friendship, within an intimate relationship. Now, the opposite of this are dark personalities. One point we need to make is that dark personalities may actually have empathy, the ability to recognize, at least at an intellectual level, the suffering of another. Not always, but in some cases, dark personalities have that ability. If they do, they will use it for their own advantage. There'll be none of the concern, none of the emotional feelings about another person and their struggles and suffering. And there'll be no altruistic behavior to help another. If they do help, there's always a goal. It's always an act. They will do it to manipulate another, to build a sense of false expectation within the other. If we see love bombing, that's a form of this, a form of manipulation built upon recognition of another's need for love and affirmation, which is something which all healthy people possess and should enjoy. But for dark personalities, they will twist this and manipulate this. So what we see within a dark personality is a corrupted version of healthy narcissism. Their personality is in reality escape from freedom. They are not free, but they are trapped within their own corruption. And they actually, while they might present themselves as independent and self-sufficient, desperately need others and are trapped by this desperate need. There's a grandiosity and sense of omnipotence and idealization which are severely exaggerated. This is not a normal sense of confidence and realization of what we can do, our gifts and talents, but an exaggerated sense of this. And there's also a tendency for such individuals to exhibit sadistic tendencies. This is particularly the case in extreme versions of what we call malignant narcissism, which we'll talk about a bit later. Within this sadistic framework, there's a desire to have absolute control over others, the desire to exploit others, and thirdly, the desire to make them suffer physically, mentally, emotionally, psychologically, in all aspects of their life and being. Now, Karen Mitchell is a management expert who did her doctoral research in these personality types. And she identified that all people with unhealthy narcissism have what she called a persistent predatory personality. This personality structure is deformed and she believed cannot be cured. And this is a point which I agree with. While there have been attempts and ongoing research into how to change this personality to make it healthier, nothing has proved to be effective. Nothing. They target those they consider as vulnerable as a predator traps or stalks their prey. Their predominant personality type might be one of stalking or might be one of trapping. In general, they'll have a combination of both, but one will dominate from my experience. But in some cases, both are highly developed, but it tends to be just one is the most developed, whether stalking or trapping the intended victim. They comprise three distinct but related subtypes who exhibit major deficits in what we call interpersonal socialization. That is your interpersonal relationships. What is healthy compared to what is healthy. And surprisingly, not all will meet the criteria for mental illness, although in my experience, most will. So what are the three main types? A lot of people would be aware of these types. And there's a lot of research out there that goes into the three types in more detail. But I'll just provide a very high overview. The first type is Machiavellian, in which the person seeks personal gain and is cold, aloof, calculating, and strategic. The second subtype is the psychopathic, sometimes called sociopathic. There is a subtle difference between psychopaths and sociopaths, but it need not concern us here. For those interested, you can search up for yourself as to the differences. But the predominant aspect of this subtype is they seek power and control over another, and they can be highly impulsive and reactive. The third type is narcissistic, in which the person seeks admiration and recognition. They see themselves as special, gifted, above everyone else, above normal people. Now, the other aspect of this is that they may be thick or thin-skinned. With thick-skinned, that is the extroverted or grandiose type. This is the typical stereotypical narcissist, full of themselves, full of their own sense of importance, believing that they are special and stating it openly and publicly. Right. No one else can achieve what I've achieved. No one else can be the same as I am. The other type is what's called thin-skinned or introverted. These tend to be a lot more fragile, and particularly fragile to perceive insults, slights, and are easily humiliated. They tend to be very insecure and track between preserving ties to others, accommodating to others, while striving to preserve their own identity. They still believe that they are special and important, and they are misunderstood and underappreciated. And the final point is they are a lot harder to spot easily because they lack the overt grandiosity of the thick-skinned, extroverted and grandiose narcissists. So they're more masked, more covert, but they are equally damaging. These kinds of people have developed a relational system that is deformed, sick, predatory, and traumatizing. It was Daniel Shaw, the psychoanalyst, who first coined the term traumatizing narcissist to describe the personal profiles of these particular individuals who seek to subjugate, control others, and have others meet their perceived needs. In this, there is still that desperate need to be recognized, acknowledged, and seen as unique. But their relationships are deformed and sick. It's not like a healthy relationship based on mutual respect. It's a relationship based on control and subjugation. They disdain their own needs, imagining that they have none, that they are beyond needs. They're so superior to everyone else. They have no needs. They are strong, whereas others are weak and needy. They're the ones who have the needs, and not them. and they require absolute domination, absolute hegemony over another person or group. They must be in total control. And if they fail to achieve this, they will descend into vindictive retribution and targeting their victims. And if they cannot achieve this, then there are many examples of individuals, particularly those who have been imprisoned, who go through a process of psychological disintegration and collapse. So that is our unhealthy, traumatizing dark triad, the type of people who go and seek to control others and engage in coercive control. Now, as before, I just want to leave you with a few questions to consider. As always, if you need time out, take time out. Go through the exercise of dropping anger, anchor if any thoughts or unpleasant feelings and memories arise. And then come back to it. Discuss it with trusted people, trusted friends, partner, mental health staff, therapist, or other people. Diarise it if that's your way, what your answers are. So the first question is, what are some of the goals and dreams or interests that were given up? How did it make you or those that you've cared for feel? Did you or them consider it wrong to have interests or hobbies that you enjoy for their own sake? Why was this? Have you or they experienced thick or thin-skinned narcissistic abuse? And looking back, what were some of the behaviours that you or they experienced that led to this?